America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis the 13th. Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head. My Rothschild niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas. Pension for the workers, nigga, please. Embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement. I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut. Foreclose with it, close out the tenement. I twist words like a speech impediment. I hope you got good credit, bitch. If not, better get a new job with benefits. While I play golf with niggas to get cheddar with. New money buys brand new carrots. My old money bunch of great grandparents. You got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya. I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
Hey, everybody, this is Chris J. This is Voice of Rebellion Radio. Welcome to UCY Radio here on Sunday night. It is a little past 9 Eastern on this warm summer evening here down here in Florida. It's been a very hot week, and for most of the country, it's been a similar situation. And for a lot of us down here in Florida, it's also height of the summer tourist season. So people that work in that, it's nice to be at the end of the week and we can just wind down with this radio show right now, get a little bit of relaxing, but at the same time stimulating our minds, and that's what we're going to be doing. And this is more of a thought-provoking show. It's just general analysis on socialism, which I've seen came up so much and so many times recently, and I haven't really talked about it in depth in a while. So I just thought that'd be a good thing to do in a really thought-provoking show, and probably get a lot of different arguments coming from many different sides, because it's came up so much, and now it's kind of funny that it's became viral only because of one person, which was Bernie Sanders, who at least used a word to say what his political beliefs were, even though many people were not convinced that he actually believed what he said he believed in. And with that happening, it seemed to have that word and the whole topic about what is socialism, what threat does it play to the United States, and a few other recent events, I also would say, have brought about some of the same sentiments, and at the same time hysteria on both sides that we haven't seen in this country in decades. And what I mean by that is that you look at the recent events that happened last week, and what happened in Dallas this week with the cops getting killed, and you see a lot of the same anti-left rhetoric coming from different media outlets, and you see, of course, all across the media, but no matter what they claim to be, they were all immediately defending the police officers in Dallas, and police in general is the big, and the police also, and it seemed to have also transferred into the police that did these actions that were highly questionable, that these police in question that killed the two black men this week, which we should just say men that they killed. And the media has turned this into such a race issue instead of a state versus the people issue, which that seems to be what it is, because when you look at the numbers, you look at the similar cases of people that also this has happened to white people, horrific events like what happened to a mentally ill man up in I believe it was like Minnesota, and they shot him 60 times. I remember that happened about 2 years ago. There's the Kelly Thomas, where this guy was pleading over and over again to stop because he was getting hurt, and he was saying exactly that to the police officer that were beating him, and they continued and until he was left in a coma, and then I believe he died not too long later. And you have many other incidences where there has also happened to not just black men, but just to men in general all across this country. And with the one in the wheelchair, to me, was the most disturbing one, because it was it's this is the only stuff that happens in our. It seems like in the United States, it seems like in other countries they deal with, for example, a mentally ill guy waving a knife around in a much different fashion, rather than they're doing the exact opposite of what they claim to do. They're claiming to be peace officers to de-escalate the situation, and they're doing the exactly opposite. They're escalating the situation, and then they kill the man in the long run. And the dude was in a wheelchair. So that double amplifies the heinous nature. I mean, I might have my story wrong on this, but I know it was something just absolutely horrid like that, and wasn't played by the media too much, because they couldn't really use that to divide us like they can with these polarizing cases of like what happened to on the Facebook Live, where the man was shot, and then the most striking thing about that to me is that the fact that he's being filmed, live streamed, the police officer, even though that all that's happening, he still is not giving the man proper, not giving the man any in that nature, medical treatment afterwards, at least trying to stop the bleeding, and because of that, that resulted in the man's death. The man that is in that Facebook video did not survive the incident. He was shot 4 times in the chest, I believe, or something like that. So you see him in terrible pain and obviously in need of medical attention right then after he was shot, those in successive nature. And the police officer didn't do anything. Was still acting, was still going with the you're resisting, that kind of mentality, which I've seen these videos, these police and stuff saying that while the man's practically dead. Sometimes they'll even, these police will go as far as to the man will be dead already, and because they killed him, they put him in handcuffs to make it seem like it's still an active situation, which to me is that's very low. Just that they're doing anything, just that they know they did something very wrong, and to cover their footsteps. And here's the thing: is that they always get the 2-week suspension or whatnot, and after they get a 2-week suspension, which is paid, they usually just go back to doing desk work or something like that. Before, within a month or two, they're back on the roads in their cruiser, like nothing happened. I mean, we have police with records of killing unarmed men, being trigger happy, and much more. And these police are back on the roads, and people want to talk about over and over again about these men's records that they had this and this and this from way back. I haven't reviewed the records thoroughly, but all I know is that none of them were capital offenses. And number 2, that's not how the justice system's supposed to work. Everybody seems to be all of a sudden turned into a judge and believes that, the killing was justified because they were blah, 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 and blah, and this. But also, one more question. Why did the police act in the nature they did, where they set themselves up to get into a struggle with the man? If this guy was actually had the record that they did, if they had the record that they did, there would be automatically they would get the call armed and dangerous potentially, or that man could be hostile to law enforcement, and it'd be totally different way of dealing with those kind of suspects. And they don't go up to, in that case, they're not going to go up to your door and ask kindly for you to get out the vehicle. They're going to just physically remove you from the vehicle and put you in handcuffs. That's going to be the only injectors. There's going to be no talking, none of that. They're not going to set themselves up to be in any kind of situation where they could struggle with you or get shot by you. if they had that record. So somewhere in there's a very fishy part of the story, especially in the overly cautious age of policing that exists today. Maybe back in the day there would have been that could have happened, something like that. But nowadays that it's impossible. They would have brought also there would have been a storm of police. They would have had 4 cruisers at least ready to take down this guy rather than what they had. Any kind of major suspect. I mean, you see them sometimes bring 3 cruisers for men that are not even noted to be dangerous. It's just that they figure that it's a difficult situation. All these in the backyard of some place or whatever. I've seen that happen. But, these kind of wanderers that exist here in my little town that, the kind of shady people are known to be a little bit shady in that they used to hang out around a house that's in the neighborhood for years and years and years. And then the guy that ran this, like, kind of shady, it was a shady halfway house, it was a halfway house, but technically the guy who ran it technically had the paperwork and whatnot to run it, but he was doing he was doing shady stuff out of the place and probably just reaping in the benefits of getting the check or whatnot from the government to house these people, but really what it just was not any kind of rehab place, it was just a place for them to get into whatnot, drink, and pass out in his yard. And now that that guy's gone, they kind of just wander around in the same area. And I've seen them before dealing with these people bring 3 cruisers. And it's not like they're known to be armed robbers or anything like that. They're just known to be kind of just wandering drunks around the town. And they bring that kind of backup when dealing with them. So, like, imagine in this case, this guy had the record that the media is claiming that this guy to him. They would have brought at least 4 cruisers, I would think, apprehending the individual. So I see a lot of division right now, and going back to my original topic of the show is that I think stuff like that has brought, again, a lot of division and words and kind of rhetoric that hasn't been used in a long time. And they're trying to divide us back like the 60s when it was that if you were for the police, you cannot be for civil rights or or black people in general. White people with the police and black people with the civil rights movements, who the civil rights movement activists at the time were painted out to be dangerous terrorists. Even MLK was painted out to be a radical. And Malcolm X, he might as well have been a domestic. He was painted out in the same light at the time as, like, I don't know, like, I can't even think of all modern day. There's no figures in America today that are painted out that way. He might as well have been like Julian Assange or something like that. He has a few followers, but most of the country saw him to be a danger. They think of Julian Assange to be a dangerous cyber terrorist. They saw Malcolm X to be a dangerous regular terrorist, pretty much. They figured that he was building a military approach to take down the white society of America, which wasn't really the truth. It was more of just a self-defense force. If you look at what he was saying, yes, they were separationists. They really didn't want to assimilate into the rest of American culture because they felt like there wasn't really no point to it because they would never accept them anyways. Just to clear the air on what I think of Malcolm X, which at this point, all that stuff's coming back though. And in a way, I think that the media has divided people, white versus black, or at least trying to, the same level that hasn't been seen in 50 years, which is rather unfortunate, isn't it? That we've stooped, and a lot of people take the bait of this division that's being painted across right now, and it's not just white versus black. You see the division between the Muslims versus the Christians, and really ultimately it's the elite versus the rest of us. That's what it should be seen as. But a lot of people would rather side with the elite and these politicians and such, rather than people that are actually trying to make a change. And they're painting out to be, people that are really trying to make a change are painting out to be extremists or whatnot. I mean, you've seen what happened. What's happened a few times was people that were legitimately trying to make a change, or legitimately trying to make a change with their own little community. I mean, if you really can break away and really make yourself 100% sovereign, I think that's what kind of was the effect that happened at Waco, is what comes to mind, which was these people had broken away from the rest of society. They had their own little community that were ready to defend themselves from the government if they ever came knocking at the door, which they eventually did, but apparently they weren't sufficiently prepared, and they got firebombed, and the government didn't care that there was women and pregnant women and children in the compound. Just excuse me for a second. I'm just gonna put. If you notice the audio quality, I actually got what isn't as good as the last show. I actually got the headphones, but I didn't put them on yet. So I'm just gonna put these headphones on. I'll be over in the chat room in a little bit, and be commenting on what you guys have to say. I mean, if it's relevant to the show. Otherwise, because a lot of times the chat room just a lot of banter going on there. I'll get to the main thing. Starting to get back into the main thing of what the show is supposed to be about is that, and now it's almost to the point of the 60s where the amount of, I think, the amount of attention that's gotten socialism when it comes to, you see a lot of you see the extreme on one side of the Facebook pages make it seem like socialism is plan is to completely demolish and destroy the Western world, and that if we don't reject it, we're going to become all Muslim colonies of, they get to these extreme, they talk about how left collaboration with the Muslims apparently, or the Islamic extremists is what they're, but they lump them all together, these people, like from Britain First or whatnot. And Britain over there, they're having a lot of that kind of tension as well, because you've had the Brexit recently, which was a good move by Britain, but it's also brought about people that were just used as an opportunistic thing to move their political agenda forward, like Britain First. And you've also had these people that are using the word socialism to attract more radicals, because they have more radicals over there in Britain, but are really just ultimately Western, and they're the same kind of, they're imperialist, warmongering, regular corporate politicians like Tony Blair, who claimed himself to be a socialist. That's what comes to mind when you see Bernie Sanders claim himself to be, something different, and he should just call himself just another establishment politician. Whatever labels you want to give yourself, you're just another one of them. And that's what Tony Blair was for Britain, even though he claimed himself to be such a different politician than, for example, Thatcher, which ultimately they were all the same. Thatcher, Blair, Cameron, and now there's going to be a new prime minister, and it's probably going to be equally as terrible for Britain. They ruled out Boris Johnson as being their prime minister, which Boris Johnson's their own, some people call him their own version of Trump. I think that just because the hairdo. He's got the crazy hairdo going. Boris Johnson's was in the Tory party, and they were talking that he would get the prime minister position possibly. Now they're talking about they're going to get their first woman since Margaret Thatcher to be the prime minister over there in Britain. And at the same time, you see Jeremy Corbyn, who seems to be, I have a mixed opinion on him, because he wants to stay in the EU, wanted Britain to stay in the EU, yet at the same time he does talk about, throwing people like Blair into jail for war crimes, and he talks about he always has been against the Iraq war from the very beginning. But then again, he doesn't really call but he does. But he's been one of the few politicians in Britain that's been willing to call out Israel a few times for what they did in Palestine. But I think comes to another underlying thing, is that there's this level of pandering sometimes politicians do, is that they'll call out what may one thing that Israel did just to get the support, but they won't really get to the root of just how sinister they are. And for example, when somebody in the Labour Party called out Israel supporting ISIS and got suspended, Corbyn didn't say a thing. In fact, Corbyn tried to pander to the same people that threw that guy out of the party temporarily, which Corbyn, if he was really a respectable man of trying to make a difference in Britain's foreign policy, he would say, yes, we need to stop supporting Israel because they did support ISIS. And here and here, there's the support via allowing them to stay in their hospitals, via here they actually been caught on video training ISIS militants. So if Corbyn was just able to do that, we'll give that address rather than the pandering about how he won't condone anti-Semitism of any kind, which I don't see anything that this British politician said that was anti-Jewish, and anti-Semitism is a redundant ad hominem attack. I don't even give credit to anyone that says it, because it's not a Semite has nothing to do with the people in Israel. Very rarely, when you call out, if you're going to say something anti-Jewish, it's going to be anti-Semitic at the same time. Semitic would mean that they're Palestinian, like the people in Palestine. Those are the only few. Those are the people that are actually Semitic. Ashkenazi Jews are actually from Europe and Eastern Europe, so they don't even have blood connections with the people that you're supposedly, when you're saying something that's anti-Jewish is anti-Semitic. Well, the thing is, they're not even Semitic, so it's not a truth. It doesn't have any rationale behind it. I don't know why they have to make this fancy word when that fancy word, when you actually look at the meaning, doesn't make any sense to be using it for what they're describing it to be used. But that's the way they twist the language, isn't it, in the media? Is that they are they use certain words, certain buzzwords over and over again to try to get people to get side one side or another. And right now, you see a lot of that with the coverage of what's recently went on. When it comes to the narratives they're trying to push as well. What's most disgusting about the narratives that they're trying to push was this Dallas, after this Dallas police sniping, is that they're trying to push gun control with that. Which every time there seems to be any kind of event, whether it's a false flag or a real event, which I haven't made this so far, I don't see too much sense of a false flag yet. Honestly, I just knew that when it comes to the Dallas events, that it's probably, for one thing, I thought it'd probably be a little bit more difficult for anybody to prove it was a false flag, like the Orlando shooting, which I came to the conclusion a long time ago that was a false flag, with many things very wrong, with people getting carried the wrong way back towards the scene of the shooting. We have a guy that's dancing right next to a guy that's supposed to be. They were carrying the guy, and then they drop him off, and he's standing up again. And he's supposedly just been shot, and then they start dancing around him. There's some really bizarre stuff was happening at that scene. I don't know. I don't know what would cause that in that event. I mean, when people go into shock, they start acting weird, but that's not that kind of weird. You're definitely not dancing, or your buddies aren't dancing around you, and and then after they stop carrying you, what about the guy that's getting carried limb by limb down the street? I mean, if that guy had any kind of injury and had any kind of chance of living, well, that guy didn't make it to the ambulance if he had any kind of injury, because that guy. It's like, ask any EMT what they tell you to do in the situation of someone being injured. It's like, oh yeah, let's go grab one limb and carry him down the street. No, that might be normal if you're carrying an injured enemy soldier to the back to camp or something like that, but definitely not somebody that a club goer after he's been shot. And on top of that, where are the paramedics that are supposed to be taking these people back to the ambulances? Why are the people doing it? It's very dangerous to allow people with no medical training to be transporting injured victims to the ambulances. That's why EMTs do it. And that's why that Orlando shooting, which I know was like a month ago, that was maybe that came to a conclusion that was a false flag. And people will hate me for saying it, but I see it. I've definitely came to the point where you would have to give me some serious evidence to prove otherwise, because to me, there's just proof. It's clear as day. And you don't even get me started with who this Omar Mateen guy was. That this guy was a clear as day actor whose father worked for the CIA. But anyways, I'm going to digress back to what I was talking about earlier. And media spreading these different narratives. I see a lot of people, I see people starting to talk about this guy like he was a Black Panther or whatnot, saying that I see, all these different accusations or whatnot, saying that this is what the Black Panthers were about. This is what, and then people talk about Black Lives Matter or whatnot. But let me remind you that Black Lives Matter and Black Panthers are not the same group. And when talk about the old Black Panthers, they didn't support senseless violence. It was about self-defense. It was the Black Panthers for self-defense, to protect from KKK/police attacks. But it was not to just do random shootings. And it was not to do terrorist attacks like people think. Most of the stuff the Black Panthers really did wasn't even about any kind of weapons. It was about building the community and making a strong community so they could separate from the government and the rest of society. And the Black Panthers weren't a completely exclusively black group. They allowed white members, and there were many white members in the Black Panthers, and they had sister organizations from different races, but they even allowed whites into their main organization. What eventually caused the downfall of it was COINTELPRO and the government infiltrating the Black Panther movement and disassembling it from the inside. It causing a lot of division, and one leader split off into the other group, and one leader split off into another group. And as Huey P. Newton, I think, was eventually murdered at the end of 1989. It was actually a few years after it ended. Most of the Black Panther activity happened in the 70s. In fact, really, most of the time, the Black Panthers weren't even early did they have a black nationalist mentality. A lot of times they're just an anti-Zionist group, anti-Zionist, anti-racist, anti-government group, which was predominantly black, with the Black Panthers, to clear that up. And the sniper, what he was apparently some disgruntled guy from the military, ex-military, that somehow had to, I guess because he had the military training, somehow was able to pull this off, where he was able to kill a few officers within a few minutes, and he apparently wounded a few other people, but to me, it all seems a little bit fishy in the timing of this, right after they had the events to piss off the other side, because they made it seem like it's like police or the Black Lives Matter crowd. You can't be really a fence sitter. They made it so it's police versus black people. They made it seem like, and that in the police they kind of blended into white versus black. That's what this is. Underlying themes that the media are trying to portray to divide us. And there's a lot of there's a lot of unsavory rhetoric on both sides coming from this, with people falling right into the trap, the division that they want us to put upon ourselves. Because of divided, we're going to fall. United, that's when we're going to have a possibility to change anything. As well, I think that this government would not mind a race war, because the fact is, if a race war was to break out, then they have an excuse for martial law. They're just looking for any kind of crisis, because it's like what Rahm Emanuel said, is that don't let any crisis go wasted. Which that's how the government sees these crises like this, is just opportunities to assert their authority. And Rahm Emanuel is a top Zionist, dual Israeli politician inside the United States. He's probably, they haven't really talked too much, it seems like, on the media about who's going to be Hillary Clinton's VP pick. But I think there's a really high possibility that the VP pick by Hillary Clinton is going to be Rahm Emanuel. And that would definitely solidify foreign policy, I think, for the Clinton administration, when she's been picked to win. You don't really think that elite want Trump as the president. That's not their plans. Their plans is to put what will be celebrated as the victory of a level-headed Hillary over what people see as the wild card Trump. And they're going to then Hillary will be there, and Hillary will be there to do a few things, declare martial law, and bomb Iran. That would be the main two things that she's going to do. And Rahm Emanuel being there would definitely solidify the rhetoric against Iran, because he's a big pusher of that kind of thing. And the idea that Israel's in mortal danger all the time and that we need to bomb Iran to save Israel. And that kind of flawed thinking that is in politics today, that they keep trying to push over and over and over again into the minds of Americans, that it's absolutely, that to the sleep Americans, they'll believe it. That's absolutely necessary to initiate a war against Iran, and to do a preemptive strike is what I've seen many, many times. But and it's been put into the mindset of Americans at this point that that's the enemy. The enemy is the Muslims. The enemy is these Middle Eastern countries, but not the one Middle Eastern country that they should be afraid of and should realize that is a country that's killed Americans before, that's bombed a U.S. Navy ship that I interviewed. These people got Americans killed in the 50s in Egypt by activating terrorist groups in Egypt because they felt our government was getting too close to Nasser. These people, this little Middle Eastern country that's the size of Connecticut, that's the one that we should be worried about, and the one that I'm not I don't advocate for a war against anybody, but somebody, the Israeli government has to be taken out of existence one way or another. And I'm pretty sure that if it actually does happen and that great day happens when Israel is no longer a state, which hopefully doesn't come by any, it would not be a great day if it means millions of people, innocent people dead. Like a nuclear weapon strike or something like that. I feel like at that point they would have already used their 400 something nuclear weapons against the rest of the world. We'd all be toast. But if somehow miraculously we're not all toast, and millions of people aren't toast because of them pushing the button, because that's what would happen if they felt any bit threatened of falling out of power, that they would probably push that red button and 411 nuclear weapons would be put to probably mainly Russian cities, because anybody that's going to put a threat against Israel is going to be Russia coming in from the north. But if that ever did happen, and Russia actually, because I think that's the only way that would happen. That I don't think any other country that has the power to actually defeat Israel would do it, because of course the United States, they have tons of influence here. Russia is about the only ones that would do it, but at this point they're still playing the diplomacy card and probably waiting for a while before that happens. And they probably know that the reason they haven't done it, people say why it hasn't done more, it's because ultimately when it comes to the main objective of Tel Aviv, is that if he gets just a little too close to Tel Aviv, they'll do it. These people are fanatics and are absolutely psychotic. Benjamin Netanyahu is literally season of evil. He would be laughing like the Joker if that ever happened, where he gets to use his nuclear weapons. But they make you seem like that Aja Ahmadinejad or whatnot would be that guy. No, Aja, of course not. They don't even have nuclear weapons. And another thing is that Aja Ahmadinejad was such a warmonger, the former president of Iran. And that's who's probably going to be the president of Iran once 2017 rolls around again. And I'm sure once his re-election, that will probably be one of the major reasons that they'll be pushing the media. They'll be saying, oh yeah, because of Aja Ahmadinejad's re-election as president of Iran, we must go and take him out and take out his government because they paid him out to be the boogeyman. That will be the probably final nail in the coffin when it comes to Americans will see, oh crap, he's back. That means we need to invade, and then after that, it won't be too long. I mean, I was thinking of some clever phrase to say there, but yeah, Iran better be counting down from 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That's about how long they got at that point. If they are starting to play that on the news, when your country's really in trouble is when they start breaking out the maps of your country. You only got a short amount of time before there's going to be airstrikes, invasion, or all of the above. You see on Fox News pointing at random shit out your country, like they were doing before the Iraq War or whatnot. You have some guy pretending like he knows everything about your country. Okay, see here is where we believe to be the military posts that are going to be doing our tactical operations. Really, they're just reading shit off a teleprompter. A guy doesn't know anything. That's why I wonder how many. I mean, you go into the newsrooms or whatnot, and how many of those individual journalists could even do like what we do in the alternative media, where a lot of times we don't have any kind of, I don't have any kind of teleprompter or nothing like that. So or any kind of cues of any kind. It's just me talking. How many of those journalists could actually do anything like that, or even know much of what they're talking about? How many of them just go in? They're not even journalists, alleged journalists. That's what it should be called. That was the whole. Remember that when that one guy totally ripped at the state of the what was it, the State of the Union dinner or state dinner or whatnot. When Larry Wilmer went up there and called Don Lemon he pretty much just ripped on everybody and called Don Lemon an alleged journalist. I think that's a perfect term for all these journalists, all these talking heads on our news. These people are not journalists. They don't scoop up their own information. They do whatever CNN, MSNBC tells them to do, and they don't have any kind of own journalistic creativity whatsoever. You probably asked them half of the places of where they're supposed to be reporting about, and they couldn't tell you shit. So, I think that's a perfect comment to be said about that. And all the journalists that are any bit that actually were journalists and actually were doing their job, like Dylan Ratigan. Dylan Ratigan called for a revolution on air. No wonder he got fired so quickly. I mean, he got fired, and then you didn't even hear anything. You look at his Wikipedia page; it's like dropped off. Like after 2009, when he said that, it just practically blank. It's like it's like Ratigan sitting there. He was probably sitting there, and then everybody else in that MSNBC news office is all saying, "Oh yeah, Obama." They're probably all talking, practically hailing Obama as the righteous Führer of the United States. They're probably talking about him like Germans talked about Hitler. Just absolutely worshiping him or whatnot. And he's just thinking, it's like I can't believe I have to report at this shitty news office. I can't believe that people actually believe Obama was going to make change. Fuck it, I'm just going to call for a revolution on air. What are they going to do? I mean, I'm surprised they didn't. That might have happened. I mean, I feel like there's just a third point. There's just some guy that was just waiting. Probably if you say like the wrong thing, it's like, oh, you watch out. You know what happens if you say the wrong thing on air. They got double for you way in the back that's ready to replace you, or they just like pop you in the head or whatnot, and then they just put in the double.
oh, we have to go to commercial break. They come back. It's like, hey, doesn't that guy look a little bit different? Like, oh yeah, it looks like his eyes in a different position. It looks like quite the same guy, huh? I don't know. It might be a makeup effect. All right, yeah. If you're old, you better really watch it then, because they can say whatever. Oh yeah, he just croaked. I don't know. Or they put some shit in your coffee or whatnot. I mean, I think that being on one of those major news networks, they probably got these people very scared, because the people at the top of it, I mean, are top CIA. I mean, they probably got CIA type, CIA, Mossad, or whatnot in the office with you, ready to deal with anybody that screws up. I mean, we're talking about these top shows, which that's why they have their top stooges that deal with the most viewers, and then sometimes they'll put somebody that might say something that not exactly fits the narrative, but they'll put that guy on at 3 in the morning when nobody's watching the news. Anyways, who even watches these? They still get like just a few hundred people sometimes. Some of these shows on the network news, they're losing. I mean, it's just like Hillary Clinton actually said that they're losing the information war, and that the alternative media is winning. And she told the truth right there. The alternative media is winning, because nobody wants to watch the same banalities and trite commentary coming from the insightful, the insightful and always fair and balanced network news heads. I love that they're also slogans you see on the you see for advertising Fox News or whatnot, fair and balanced coverage of all these world events. But then you actually turn on some guy, Bill O'Reilly screaming about poor people, or Bill O'Reilly saying, "Oh, I'm not trying to make any kind of racial comments here, but and then he lies about having been by combat or whatnot. He was also lied about, or what? No, I've actually being a military veteran. I think he lied about that completely, when he's supposed to be the guy that respects so heavily the troops and supports all our troops because they're defending our freedom, and then he lies about military service, which he probably lost respect of most of the people that he claimed to have respected so much. And talk about that is that you have these Facebook pages that are supposed to, it's a little bit irksome, isn't it, when you have your friends that are supposed to be awakened and know what's going on, and then they're sharing stuff for Facebook pages about Sharia law coming to the United States, or breaking news. It's a hyper sensationalized article of something about. Oh yeah, Obama picks another Muslim cabinet member or whatnot, or I won't say cabinet member, but some government position to scare you. And it pretty much looks like stuff that came from Fox News, but a little bit more sensationalized. And people that honestly believe in the whole Muslim conspiracy, that Muslims are here to take over this country, or that socialists are here they believe one of the two. When they believe one of those two, Muslims or socialists are here to take over, not realizing, again, people ignore the big Zionist elephant in the room all the time. That it's already something that's been in progress, and we're almost at the end of the plan. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to believe that. To believe people, that's how the newspapers. It's like Malcolm X said, is that if you read the newspapers too much, you'll be hating the oppressed and loving the oppressors. And that's exactly what's going on, is that the people that these Muslim population in the United States already catches enough shit, and by the media that's controlled by a lot of Zionists and the other corporate interest into the media. It's not like they're making Muslims seem so great, especially if have you ever watched Fox News? They make it seem like there's a big conspiracy to make Muslims the whitewash what Muslims are doing in this country or whatnot. How about the big conspiracy to whitewash everything that the Zionists do over there to the Palestinians, or what they do over here? When's the last time you heard that AIPAC's the biggest lobby in this country? When's when's the last time have you heard on the media about Operation Mockingbird? There's literally a conspiracy written on paper trail. You don't have no objectability to it. There's no conspirizing to it. It's on paper trail. Operation fucking Mockingbird that said that Zionists. It was that now that the news will be portrayed favorably to Israel, and anything that's anti-Israel won't play on the news from now on out. And that the information campaign would be to paint out Israel to be a flawless country, peaceful and democratic, which none knows. And you can see the conspiracy at play. There's the same narrative over and over again. Every time that Israel bombs Palestine, it's never that we are a bunch of evil bastards and we dropped bombs on the Palestinian children because we're trying to absolutely demoralize them and take away all their land, and so they'll leave. Because that's ultimately their plan, is to take every last piece of Palestinian land. No, they say it was a mistake. It was, the Hamas is in the neighborhood and whatnot. Or they'll talk about the Islamic terrorists that are supposedly in Palestine, or that they need to act this way because of Islamic terrorists. Well, they fund Islamic terrorists. They've been caught on video funding or training Islamic terrorists. So when you go a little bit deeper into all of it, then you realize that it's all a bunch of horse shit. Anything of talk about the Sharia takeover of America. Oh no, so a guy got I've seen some of these ridiculous stories about. These are non-stories, and if you take more than 15 seconds to react to a story besides looking at how ridiculous these stories are about, it's like proof of Sharia law takeover, a man arrested for believing bacon outside of a mosque. I was like, okay, number one, it sounds made up. Number two, it sounds like a non-story. Number three, the guy just sounds like a douche who, it's like that people would be like, well, that's their right as an American citizen. Yeah, still doesn't make you not a douche. I mean, there's a lot of things you have a right to do, but you're still a douche if you do them. I mean, ultimately, yeah, you could go to the retirement home right now and call them a bunch of old fucks or whatnot, and tell them that and tell them about a bunch of stuff that old people don't want to hear. You could tell them about how, averages show you only have 3 years to live and stuff like that. Yes, that would be your right to do that, but you'd be an absolutely shitty person if you said that. I don't know what the statistic on that. Don't quote me on that statistic, but yeah, you could, or you could do other shitty stuff. You still have a right to do it. Hell, you could be the. Also, you do have a right to go up to a cop and flip them off. That's true, but of course that they're going to probably violate your right on that, and probably at the very minimum find something to arrest you for, or write you a ticket. They'll probably arrest you for it. I mean, it depends where you are. Unless you're a department that's doesn't give a fuck, and then they're just there to chill out, then they might just ignore it. If you're a black guy and you're looking kind of stylish, they might kill you for it. What I mean by that is that yeah, if they could justify your killing on the TV very easily by what you're wearing, because that's a big part of the factoring in of when you on the media or with American people with what they're wearing, yeah, they might do it. I mean, these police, not every police is a complete asshole, but there's a lot of police that are. And they are supporting a system of fascism that will eventually lead to martial law. I mean, there's some good cops out there. But defined cops are like the ones that were back in the day prior to, and still, I remind you, there's always been bad cops. There was never a point either. It wasn't like there was a point where it became broken, and then from then on out, we've been left in a situation. There was always these killer cops in there that were just trigger happy. But there was more good cops back in the day, and the police was more about serving people. To find police that are actually about serving people is getting much harder today. And there's few examples here and there. And I don't like to hear that excuse that, well, they did this one good thing that one time, or even if they did 95% of the things they did was good, but 5% were horrific. that doesn't justify it. Just because you did all those good things, but then you ended up killing a man unjustly, or you were the cop that they don't talk about that sexual assaults by police officers that happen in this country, which is quite. I'm pretty sure it happens not just by male cops, it happens by female cops. Happens. I've seen the case of female and female, it was a lesbian cop was sexually assaulted a woman at a traffic stop. I mean, it's like all across the board, and part of it's because the power trip mentality that a lot of these cops are going through. But a lot of these cops at this point, they also these departments attract type A personalities that oftentimes are very that are just there for the power, that they want to have the authority and are not there to serve people and make a difference in the community. I mean, also, what is not cool is that when the media shows these, few examples right now to try to whitewash what these few cops did, they're trying to show all these, good cops, which, these are legitimately good people. Probably shouldn't be doing the job they're doing. They could serve the community better by doing other jobs. But these seem to be legitimately good people. But it's like we have these few guys over here, so that must somehow counterbalance or somehow eliminate what these other cops did. It doesn't work like that. But that's how it seems to work. Or on Facebook, you see a lot of that. People, it's like, well, see this guy. Was it Tommy Norman, that guy out there in Little Rock? This guy seems to be an absolute great dude out there, and is in my opinion, he's in the wrong field. He should be doing something else if he wants to be. He could help his community even more doing that. But I think that this guy is an example, or like Ray Lewis, who's a former police officer who came on my show. He was a former police chief of Philadelphia, and he seemed to be. He started into a Black Lives Matter supporter and Occupy Wall Street supporter, and he had enough of the bullshit and started calling it out many years later. People threatened him and all kinds of stuff for it because they believe him to be pretty much like a traitor. But he has done, what very few police did or have done recently. But he's given a service back to his community. Meanwhile, we also have, cops that a lot of them are tested positive for steroids and shit and other drugs. I think that, people say, well, it's a big deal. It's like, it's not like they're athletes or whatnot, that they're cheating. But when a police officer does steroids, it definitely leaves them in an unstable mental condition that will, which will more likely lead to more aggression being used and more likely to inflict police brutality on somebody. And also, it's illegal to take steroids without a doctor's permit. It's a prescribed drug, and I'm pretty sure these people are getting unprescribed as well as a deal. Unless I saw this news article, then it would have been for no reason, because you're legally allowed to take steroids if your doctor prescribes it. But if your doctor didn't prescribe it, then it's illegal. And yeah, it kind of sounds like a silly law. I mean, it goes back to the whole war on drugs stuff. But why should they be above the law? That's the main thing that's upsetting. And the cops have been shown to be doing all kinds of other drugs, sometimes even participating with sex with prostitutes in the name of busting the criminal, if that's what you actually believe they were doing, rather than not just having a little bit of fun. Is that a lot of these police like to live above the law. Again, like I said, is that not every police officer is a complete douchebag, but the institution of policing today is purely to enforce the law. It has nothing to do with serving the community, and the Supreme Court ruled this way. In 2005, there was a ruling that said that's all the police have to do is enforce the law, no matter how heinous, how totalitarian the laws are. That's what they're going to do. That's going to be their job. So with that in mind, we need to take a different approach when it comes to our, I think American, and what I mean by we, the American people in general, should take a different approach if they knew that. That simple fact that there is no longer any legal obligation for them to do anything good for the people. But it's kind of like it's kind of like the same effect of when it comes to the police, how the people's delusional mentality sometimes is like the same as the voting. It's like, well, it led to this result here or whatnot. We've had this victory here, which a lot of times, whatever strengthens or whatever things that have happened in the community that supposedly was helped by the police of that community or whatnot. A lot of times it's just their own people in the community that bettered it, not the police that got whatever. Really, ultimately, a strong community is much stronger than anything that any kind of law enforcement can do to help, for a poor neighborhood deal with drugs or whatever crime has happened in the community. A strong community outweighs that because you can get to the root of the problem, and stopping the stuff from even happening in the first place rather than trying to stop it after it's already happened. Anyways, I'm looking back in the chat room. Not as quite as much buzz as today. It seemed like it kind of dropped off a little bit a while ago. But I wanted to read, this has nothing really to do with the topic of the show, but I wanted to read this quote, and it's, I'm going to rant a little bit more about Israel right now. It's that people do realize what the Israelis believe themselves to be a master race, and before I go on, because talk about right now the topic has been about racism. Has been about race recently. So how about let's talk about race and let's talk about how the Israelis, one of the main people we send our tax dollars to. We send $5 billion a year, over $5 billion a year to Israel every year. So to a country that we send so much money about, maybe Americans should know a little bit more of what they're about. And the Israelis think that they are that they're superior to everyone else, and they believe us to be all subhuman. And they have a word for us, and they call anyone that's non-Jewish. And the people that founded Zionism weren't even religious, so this is more about blood than anything, is that they believe by blood that they are superior, which is exactly the same mentality of the Nazis. But they think that we're goyim or cattle. That's the word. If Americans knew one word, one Hebrew word of what the Israelis think of Americans and think of that we're just there to serve them, because that's what even a rabbi said. And the Zionist rabbi said is that it's purely that the purpose of the non-Jewish people was to serve the Jewish people. And the quote was that when a goyim dies, it's sad, like when your donkey dies, because it was meant to serve you. See, and that's the cattle means goyim. And this word comes from the Talmud, where it's really first utilized, which the Talmud pretty much lays out the idea of supremacy of Jewish compared to the rest of the world. And the Talmud was like a reaction to the Bible. After the Bible had been wrote, it angered some of these more extremist factions in the Jewish community, and it ignited the Talmud being wrote. And then Talmud is what these top Zionists like to rely on. Torah preaches a quite different message. It's quite similar to just what the Quran and the Bible preaches, which, in my opinion, could be misconstrued to something that's not. But to me, it's just generally peace and respecting everyone like you'd like to be respected yourself. I mean, that seems to be the main message that comes about when you look at these three books. But the Talmud is not the same way. The Talmud is a distortion, and it's much like as much. It's the Talmud it's a complete 180. Compared to a lot of the messages in the Torah. For example, like the Zionist homeland, which wasn't even the Torah. It's not even really considered to be important. It'd be like if the Westboro Baptist Church wrote their own Bible. That would be for Christianity what the Talmud is for Judaism. And all this stuff but this stuff is absolutely horrific. I mean, and if Christians of America knew what the Talmud has to say about their religion, they would be absolutely outraged. And if just Americans as general knew, because these same Americans that scream about racism online on Tumblr, they don't know anything about the racism that Israel does with Jim Crow segregation against Palestinians, and they're not even allowed on the bus. They're not even on the back of the bus. They're not even allowed on the bus. That's how the Palestinians have to live their lives. They have separate roads for Palestinians. They have separate everything for Palestinians. And blacks are sterilized, and black Jewish people are sterilized inside of Israel. But with this all in mind, this is the quote I wanted to read. Our race is the master race. We are the divide gods of this planet. We are as different from the inferior races as they are from insects. In fact, compared to our race, other races are beasts and animals, cattle at best. Other races are considered as human excrement. Our destiny is to rule over inferior races. Our earthly kingdom will be ruled over with a leader with a rod of iron. The masses will lick our feet and serve us as slaves. Menachem Begin, 6th Prime Minister of Israel. Oh, that was the Prime Minister of Israel back in 1982. You said that. Which, if you recognize the name, that was the Prime Minister of Israel at the time. That was the one that was a Prime Minister at the time during the United States invasion of Beirut. And came about, you heard a little bit, he's a more notable prime minister. He's kind of like a Netanyahu with his level of sinisterism. And there's just these kind of quotes go on and on and on. And let's talk about, what's funny is that, again, another misuse of the word socialism, I think we use anytime where, when Zionism is followed by socialism, I think that you have an interesting perspective, or not perspective, an interesting dynamic now put on, which is that these are very conflicting ideologies. But then socialism is supposed to be about equality of all man. I mean, this is at least what Karl Marx said. I'm not saying what happened in every country in practice. And that's what Bernie Sanders claims himself to be, kind of that he's a staunch supporter of Israel, which obviously doesn't believe in the equality of all man. I mean, you just heard what the 6th Prime Minister of Israel said, but yet he calls himself to be a socialist at the same time. Very conflicting ideologies. And during the Bolshevik Revolution, a lot of Zionists came about inside the Bolshevik movement. So I think some of the more hardcore ones were expelled. But I think a lot of them, at least that's what I've heard, but I also seen that, apparently that's not the case, because Joseph Stalin, when he was the second country to recognize Israel, the USSR was the second country to do so. And I don't believe that bullshit that, they didn't know that Israel turned out to be the way it was, because they supposedly knew. I mean, they knew exactly what it turned out to be, because Lenin and Trotsky had wrote about it. What that would lead to be would lead to become the state it is. Now, the question is, it looks like that. Well, I know at least Stalin was in support of Zionism. So, what about Lenin and Trotsky? And when we talk about socialism, one of the major things that comes about is the Bolshevik Revolution. And the Bolshevik Revolution. Sorry, apparently I dropped off there for I don't know how long I dropped off. Trying to look through the right here in my call log. Usually it tells me like I can see it tells me the other calls from before, but I guess not on today. I can see how long the call lasted. But going back to what I said, and that means I hope I did. Doesn't mean I didn't even get to say what I was saying about is that all this talk about racism right now, and all this talk about a lot of people screaming about racism in this country, but don't know about Jim Crow segregation that's happening inside of Israel, where Palestinians are they're not on the back of the bus, they're just not on the bus in general, and they have to use different roads, and many big parts of their life are inconvenienced. Big parts of their lives are inconvenienced by the kind of way that these kind of way of life that these Israelis are making them live, and they see not just the Palestinians and Africans as inferior. They see the rest of us as inferior because there's a word that they use for us. It's goyim. It means cattle. And in the Talmud, that's where the word was originated. And Talmud is the book that these Zionists, these like top religious authorities of Israel, the top Zionist rabbis use to these top Zionist rabbis use in order to justify a lot of the things that they do, and they ultimately it sounds like the banter of a madman. A lot of these quotes, and a lot of times they say stuff like what I said, but I don't know if it got actually on air. That the sixth prime minister of Israel said this wasn't even. This is actually their leader at one point back in the 80s. Menachem Begin said this, and if you guys didn't catch that in the chat. Sorry, guys. Apparently, if I left the Skype app for just a minute again. Just go back to chat. I wasn't having any problems when I did this like a week ago. I had a bandwidth problem or whatnot. I can't do two things at once, but I guess it dropped off again. But apparently, I caught on the chat room people saying that there was dead air again. And I know that the second time I'm reading that quote, I'm pretty sure the first time I read that quote, because I'm not going to read it a third time, because I have to go back there. We'll start to memorize it, though. I already read it this twice. from Menachem Begin, or just to make that clear, that's the sixth prime minister of Israel that said that. And I think that going back to the main topic is that, well, we're on the main topic, is that in America we've had socialism again. This seems to be just another. It's ultimately it's detracting from what should be seen as the real boogeyman of America, and our government and the forces, special interests at play when it comes to our government. But socialism goes along with the same stuff as the people that believe that Sharia law is a major threat to America, as well as believe that socialism be a major threat to America, because they're non-threats. They're just not even really players in this whole political game. And Sharia law is bad. Let me get that straight. Sharia law is bad, and it would be bad if it ever came to America. The thing is, it's not coming to America. And the Muslims in this country, the idea that the Muslims in this country hold any kind of political power is wrong. They probably hold the least amount of political power. These Muslims in this country you see how they're shown in the media. You've seen how they're treated, that they're profiled. They are definitely not in a position to take total control of this country. And that's what people are trying to make it seem like or that's what the plan is, to put the Muslims in charge of this country. That's what that I see on some pages on Facebook or whatnot, them trying to make it seem like. As well, socialist is a little bit different. If it ends up like something like what happened in Mao's China or Stalin's Russia, socialism in those two countries is very bad. But Yugoslavia ended up very good because it was a different model. This is what they were focused on themselves. It was with nationalist elements inside, not national socialism, which is just fascism. But like what happened in Tito's, with Tito, he was actually able to build a country with a thriving middle class, high production, and a booming economy, while keeping a very high level of freedom inside of Yugoslavia, where people were allowed to travel freely. They had a relatively free. They had a pretty relatively political freedom. Tito stayed the president for life, but it wasn't like he had 80% disapproval either. He had a lot. I think even if there were elections, they would have continued to have voted for Tito forever and forever. I mean, actually, I think that elections could have went against the will of because the elections could have been rigged and played with, rather than what they had there. Like, I think that the people wanted Tito to stay as long as he could, and he stayed for his entire life. The rest of his life, Tito was the president of Yugoslavia, and then he got the title of president for life in 1963. Tito and Kennedy were becoming allies as well in the early 60s, and Tito, Nasser, and JFK, and could have definitely what was I thinking of, and Nehru of Indonesia, with the collective population of their country or / power of the countries that they controlled, they definitely were about to make a serious dent towards going the other way and reversing the New World Order's plans. And at the same time, JFK was not looking to continue the military-industrial complex's plan for the Cold War, but rather he was looking to end the Cold War and get to whatever peace he could with the Soviet Union, rather than marching towards the atomic bomb and the atomic explosions and nuclear war. And he was legitimately looking at alliances, Tito, and looking at alliances, that bloc, which was against NATO at the time. JFK, I don't think had any intention to stay in NATO, or for the United States to stay in NATO when that happened. But Tito, even after all that, he built a country that both sides were too afraid to invade. Both the USSR and the United States, he was ready to fend off invaders from both sides. And it never happened until way later, after Tito was the president of Yugoslavia. The United States, of course, did the invasion in 1999 in Yugoslavia after it already was no longer the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, rather the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which was bombed after there was the national strife inside of Yugoslavia between the Serbs and the Croatians and the Serbians and the Bosnians. There was the Croatians split off, and now Kosovo split off of Serbia, which is a made-up country. Just so everybody knows that Kosovo has no real culture. Kosovo split off of Serbia, which split off, or Serbia split off of Yugoslavia. Kosovo split off of Serbia, and now also Montenegro split off of Serbia, Montenegro, and there was also one more, Macedonia, split off. So now 6 different countries. Used to be one country, Yugoslavia, for many years, and Tito was at the leader of that from what was that, be 45 years out of the Yugoslavia existed for a total of, I think, 85 years. So yeah, he ultimately, it wasn't for almost close to half of the time of Yugoslavia's existence, counting all periods of Yugoslavia, the monarchy, the socialist Yugoslavia, which Tito was at the helm of the entire time of, or not the entire time of existence, but all but 15 years, or all but 12 years, because he died in 1980, and then he then we existed for 12 more years. 1992, it became the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Then there was 11 years under the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which was mainly the leader at that time was Slobodan Milosevic, who later was the one that was framed for all that happened, the genocide that happened in Yugoslavia, but wasn't NATO wasn't, nobody from NATO was charged, and Slobodan Milosevic died in jail in 2006, while most of the people while everybody in NATO walked freely, while they were the ones that bombed the country in 1999, making the situation a lot worse. You know, when people say that Bill Clinton wasn't involved in any kind of major bombing operation to talk about Yugoslavia, they all have one. It's the Gulf War '91 with George H.W. Bush. Yugoslavia was Bill Clinton. There was George W. Bush with Iraq and Afghanistan beginning. Obama continuing Iraq and Afghanistan. Libya, Syria beginning. So now the last two have had 2 wars that they both initiated. And Obama continued 2 wars while he started 2 more with Libya and Syria. And next one is going to be the continuation of, now it's going to be carried on, Clinton's going to be carried on Iraq, Afghanistan, because those wars are not really over. I mean, Iraq has just been pushed on to paramilitaries. They're still doing U.S. military operations, essentially. And the Afghanistan war is still 9,600 soldiers there. They're there until 2024, so they're going to be there for a while. So those are endless wars. I mean, anyone that, just to put in perspective how long it was since the first 91 war, you would have to be 43 to have been an adult at any point of the pre-91 war era in Iraq. And after that, there was that short period of calm, and then it was 3, there was the war, and then since then there's been constant turbulence, and now they have the ISIS operation. ISIS in the United States have been collaborating. I think what's going on is that they're trying to depose the government that they have now and try to put in one that's less friendly to Iran. That's what's happened. Is Iraq, Iran, and Syria have become allies in the fight against ISIS and terrorism, while the while they wanted a while the United States wanted to make a total puppet state after the deposing of Saddam, which Saddam ultimately was just a United States puppet for a long time of his leadership. Was for the first 11 years practically, he was a open United States puppet, and he actually asked the United States for the green light before he gassed the Kurds, which later on the United States used that against them. Just 4 years after that happened, they were saying, "Oh yeah, we need to invade Iraq because what partially, in fact, what they did to the Kurds and those people that he invaded, or I mean that he gassed the Kurds and killed 5,000 Kurds. Yeah, but you gave him the green light. It was with your weapons that he did it with. It was with United States weapons that he gassed the Kurds. In fact, it was with United States support that he was doing the war crimes against Iran." Now, there's no justification for what Iraq did to Iran during that war, and also Iraq sponsored, which today is an Israeli-supported terrorist group, and I don't think it's any coincidence, the MEK, which there's a few actually, kind of like dormant terrorist groups inside of Iran, which is alarming because that means that they could have a rebel insurgency, in quotation, rebel, but you know what that really means, like a mercenary uprising inside of Iran. That'd be similar to the situation inside of Syria, which is the United States and Israel and Western power sponsoring a rebel group / terrorist group to destabilize the country. You know, like they're going to call them rebel groups on the media, but these are really terrorist groups, like in Syria, where these rebel groups are killing minorities, using chemical weapons against their own people, and also, I mean, clearly crucifying Christians too. These are not moderate by any means, but the media calls them moderate. And these groups are just there to destabilize the country. And then possibly, if they're not successful, then the United States comes in with the big guns and invades, which is still not outside the realm of possibilities. In fact, I think the plan is to invade Syria. The United States will invade Syria, probably with Hillary Clinton as the president. In Syria, they actually just kind of eased it in. Isn't that how the case has been? Is that they just put a few more? Oh, we're saying no boots on the ground. Okay, there's going to be boots on the ground. Okay, we won't go any further. We won't go like anything crazy, like thousands of troops. Next thing you know, there will be thousands of troops. We won't do 100,000 plus soldier invasion. Then they'll go in with the big invasion. If they're not even going to take that extra step. I think they're just going to say we're going to go with the 100,000 soldier plus invasion. They'll do it, and that'll lead to a war with Iran, because that's the back door into a war with Iran. Is that because they have a mutual defense pact? If Syria is attacked, Iran will defend, and with that, they'll lead to a private regional-wide war with fighting from Tehran to Riyadh. It will be very ugly if ever that happens. Well, it's not ever. I think it's when it happens. Which I'm not trying to be a pessimist here, but I'm trying to be realistic and warn people of what's actually happening. Because if I was to say that there was a chance that it's going to change within the next year, what has been in the plans for years and years for them. I mean, they've been trying to scare us of Iran for how many years? You know, talking about how they're 6 months away from a nuclear weapon. You know, it's absurd. I mean, I'm trying to think of a metaphor for this. Is that would it be like? You know, what it'd be like? It'd be like your neighbor that you don't like, but you're trying to get your other neighbors to be against them. You keep saying that. I don't know how I'm going with this metaphor. Let's see what I can try to pull out of this metaphor. Well, no, you say the same lie. Oh, that he stole my blah blah blah, stole this, stole blah, 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 and you say some lie for the next 30 years, and then by the end of it, no one really believes you. That's what has happened. Is that a lot of Americans have stopped believing that rhetoric, but some of them still do, and they're foolish to believe that 30, after 30 years of lies, that this is it. They're gonna do it. They're gonna have the 6 months. We're 6 months away from the nuclear weapon. If they could have if they wanted to. Iran has that kind of technology, but they're using it for peaceful energy, and they definitely have a justification when they're surrounded by, when they got Israel nearby that has an illegal nuclear weapons program, and they have India and China. They have a lot of nuclear powers around them. They should be made a little bit more careful, and they should be ready. I mean, look up. There is an effect to that. Is that when you're a country like that, and North Korea why hasn't they have been touched by the United States yet? Because they got nuclear weapons, and there's that deterrent. By Iran having that deterrent, I don't think many people that actually knew what was going on would really blame them. I mean, nuclear weapons are bad. Nuclear weapons should have never be built, and they're an absolute horrible creation. But the problem is that now we live in the world of nuclear weapons. So any country that is not trying to get invaded probably should consider building them. Because if you don't have them, you don't have a real deterrent. It's the only real deterrent that a small military has. Now, it's like different. I think Iran is on the verge. They're not quite. I mean, they're a military that all the policymakers believe that they can take on and defeat. It's not, but the Russian military, for example, they don't even have the nuclear deterrent. Is not even, that's the very last option. Their own military could defeat the United States military, but it's whether the United States will use the nuclear weapons first, or a bigger question: if they were to go for the big target, Israel, whether Israel would be crazy enough to use the 411 against the rest of the world, which that's what people are scared of. Because it's like they know they got that mentality. It's like, well, we'll take all you. It's like, if you want to take us down, we're taking all of you guys down with us. They're fanatics. These people are like the Nazis. They're everything that the textbooks told us the Nazis are. They are them, and the Nazis were that way. A lot of the same rhetorics all over again. The deportation camps were brought up by a Likud politician not too long ago. Damn it, I totally blanked out right there. I was like, oh yeah, to talk about deporting all Palestinians out of the country to somewhere else. The plans for continuing the ghettoizing of Palestine and putting it in behind further and further separation. The apartheid wall, which is not called the apartheid wall, but that's what I call it. It's called the separation barrier, technically. I remember one time that's what I referred to it in class as the apartheid wall, and then I kind of got I kind of got some weird looks for it. But I was like, I couldn't even think of the real name for it. I was like, it's the apartheid wall, right? And I was like, I knew that it wasn't called that, but I was like, I can't even think of the real name for it, because they were like showing the picture of this Banksy painting, and they were saying where this is at, and I knew where it was at. And that's the separation barrier, or that's the apartheid wall that separates the Palestinians from Israel. Which, anything in that class when it came to stuff like that, like historical references or political references, of course I got, and I was like, I knew who they were talking about, which is cool. And at times I absolutely blew the minds of, I think some people, talk about 9/11. I remember we talked about 9/11 towards graduation, and my teacher was trying to say that how ridiculous it was for us to thinking the 9/11 was an inside job. I was explaining how it's physically, scientifically impossible. That's really one of the main things. Before even going to the dancing Israelis and stuff, you just go straight to that fact that it's scientifically impossible. And to suggest that the official story is true, you are denying the laws of physics. That buildings don't fall free fall speed on their own footprint. It doesn't work like that. Jet fuel does not burn at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, which apparently that's what steam or steel beams melt at. And that's apparently what it burned at in order to melt the steel beams. Also, let's not forget that that on top of all that, on top of the damn fire looks like it's barely even smoldering compared to what it would have to be. It would have to be literally a white fire. Do people never did a bonfire before? That's what it's like. It's simple common sense stuff people seem to not get when it comes to talk about false flags mainly. That people, which this is not really this is a false flag as well. There's two different types of false flag. There's the false flag where no one's harm is done complete with actors, and there's the 9/11 false flag where people are sacrificed for a political agenda. 9/11 was people died. 3,000 people certainly did die out of 9/11. But I think that what possibly could have happened is those 3,000 were the ones that they left there, while a lot of the people were told to go home. I mean, apparently a lot of people, only like a third of the people showed up to work that day on Tuesday. Kind of a weird day for a lot of people not to show up to work. There's not a regular Tuesday. And apparently apparently a lot, I bet it was about a lot of the higher up business people. For example, Silverstein himself usually dined at the World Trade Center for breakfast. He didn't do it this morning because of a doctor's appointment. Instead of going back to the World Trade Center after the doctor's appointment, you know what he did? He decided to take a walk around the city that day. So definitely an odd succession of circumstances led to Larry Silverstein surviving that day, and then he collected $4.5 billion off the deaths of 3,000 Americans. Well, I don't know if they're all Americans, but 3,000 people in the World Trade Center. Because I think there was, for example, some foreigners and stuff that were working on that were in the World Trade Center as well. So it was the World Trade Center with trade from all around the world being done in there. World Trade Center 7 was the one with all the records, where the day before $2.3 trillion that the Department of Defense had lost. Where would the records be? That World Trade Center 7 just also happens to fall from structural damage caused by the towers fall. And the thing falls in like 6 seconds. It's a 47-story building that free falls into an implosion. And yet, how many years later has it been? We are still, a lot of Americans, and I mean by a lot of Americans, the overwhelming majority still believe the official 9/11 story. I mean, it's only like 15%, I think, actually know about the truth about 9/11 to one extent or another. I don't consider what this change, the revision of the official story, but it's definitely not the truth about the Saudi involvement. This is a little piece that they're giving out, but they're trying to deflect the blame from the United States government and Israel, which more and more information about that has gone out into recent years about, for example, Israel, the dancing Israelis, the van on George Washington Bridge filled with explosives, all that. More of that has gone into the internet, and people finally are starting to learn and finally starting to get educated on that part, those sectors of 9/11 truths. And with all that, talk about socialism in America, uh, it's kind of frustrating, isn't it? The people that are claim to be anti-imperialist socialists, but support the Zionist plans in Syria. For example, like Socialist Alternative, I know at least Australia one is pro-Syrian rebels. While I support the imperialist plan to take out Bashar al-Assad and go against the will of the Syrian people and put these terrorist mercenaries into power and pretty much turn Syria into another Saudi Arabia is what would happen if the Syrian rebels were to take power inside of Syria. And this is what, the phony left. And I'm not talking about the real left, but I'm talking about the phony left supports inside of, and at the same time, they fall into all the same media lies about Venezuela. For example, there's tons of media distortions right now coming out about Venezuela. I'll talk a little bit about that. Is that in Venezuela, talk about this food crisis, they talk about power shortages and all kinds of stuff, which has ended. Energy rationing has ended inside of Venezuela, but it's being caused by sanctions rather than internal economic problems. It's being caused by being sanctioned the crap out of by the United States and to try to cripple their economy and they want to make Venezuela collapse because the United States wants the oil and they want to put a Rothschild bank inside of Venezuela, which they do not have. Also inside of Venezuela, they have they talk about the food lines or whatnot. They talk about the food shortages. That's being highly exaggerated. Where in many places the food shortages are not even really happening. In Caracas, yes, there's been some isolated food shortages. There's a drought caused by an economic problem that's not exclusive to Venezuela, but also Colombia and the region as well. The entire region, not just Venezuela. Also, on top of that, is that in Colombia, they have it probably worse because in Colombia, recent food prices have went up 8 times in the American ally of Colombia. 8 times higher the food cost than just a little while ago, and they have serious inflation. Another thing that should be factored into all this is that that they also talk about the food martial law and stuff like that. They say that they're guarding food with people's AK-47s on the back of the trucks. Well, let's look at the reality of the situation is that you also have, coming from Colombia, quarters and desperate people that are looking for food because guess what? They can't afford their food in their own country, so they go to Venezuela, opportunistic, going to supermarkets, going to buy out whole supermarkets and stuff like that because in Venezuela it's so much cheaper than in Colombia. What's happening, and also it's not like in Colombia that you can just go in and shoplift what you need. Like I think in the United States, worst comes to worst, it's a lot. I think it's a lot easier in the United States to shoplift than it is to shoplift in Colombia. Because in Colombia, sometimes they have armed men with machine guns outside to protect the stores at all times. Here you got the cameras and whatnot, but if you're sneaky, I mean, I think that a shoplifter that's actually knowing what he's doing is not just not doing it for a little bit of fun, but actually knows what he's doing. Could be very hard to get caught. But in Colombia, there's no way. So they check your bags on the way out, and then what? If you try to run, you have a guy with a machine gun following you. Which, believe me, they were not that. It's not like they won't do it over some food or whatnot. Especially trying to take meat or something away, something expensive. They might pop you over it. Especially if it gets more serious and the situation starts escalating into a more chaotic situation there in Colombia, they'll definitely be doing stuff like that in order to prevent stuff flying off the shelves. But what it will eventually lead to is just all-out food riots in Colombia. And in Venezuela, they had this happen, not under the Chavez government, but way back in the Andres Perez government, they had this with soaring food prices, and a similar situation to what's happening in Colombia now, leading up to Carazaco in February of 1989. After food prices and looting of stores due to the food prices leaving most people leaving a lot of people unable to buy food, there's protests of left-wing protesters. These left-wing protesters were shot and killed in cold blood by the Venezuelan government at the time under right-wing dictator Andres Perez. Carlos Andres Perez afterwards was impeached for corruption like 4 years later. But Andres Perez was doing the Carazaco. He was he was the one that commanded it pretty much. Unless there were the extra orders came from the United States telling him that he needed to crack down on the protesters. Anyways, the protesters, it said up to 3,000 protesters were shot and killed in cold blood during the Carazaco. Which the Carazaco is what is going to happen in Colombia if when it comes to the food riots and the food being stolen right off the shelves. What will happen in Colombia if the situation is not dealt with? 8 times I'm talking about food rise in prices. Which, if you think about it, these people don't make a lot of money. These people make maybe a few hundred a month, and food costs. I mean, I saw food was decently cheaper there than in the United States. But with recent prices, it might be more expensive now, and there's no way that a lot of people are affording the food. So there's going to be a lot of people desperate going to Venezuela and stuff to try to take food from there. So that's probably part of the reason why, for example, now food's being guarded so heavily with guys with machine guns on the back of the trucks. Is because food, the Colombians, is absolutely necessary because in their own country they might not be able to get it. It's also, like I said, in front of the supermarket in Colombia, you might see a guy with a machine gun. So that should be. It's a regional thing. What seems to be overzealous measures for security or whatnot. That's not just because it's Venezuela and because it's a Maduro government. It's because of it's probably partially because of the crisis at the border, right? What's caused that is there used to be the border was open between Venezuela and Colombia, and there used to be a steady flow of illegal contraband across the border. So a lot of people were off the system of Colombia and buying stuff that was at street corners and stuff. Oil and stuff was being sold much cheaper. Well, oil is $4 a gallon in Colombia. So a lot of times they just went to this illegal gas that was significantly cheaper. Or wouldn't even be significantly cheaper, just be cheaper. But they got it so much cheaper over there that it's almost pure profit. All you have to do is the run of getting all the gas and loading up a truck or whatnot. I mean, it's been caught trucks of milk, trucks of all kinds of stuff crossing from Venezuela to Colombia. That's how lucrative the smuggling market is. Now, that's how to understand the severity of the situation when it comes to why there are shortages is that you need to understand the smuggling market coming from that country to Colombia. It's very lucrative. Venezuela as well, with the power shortages, have came to an end when it comes to energy ration. This idea that they have no food no power is silly. Also, the no food thing, yeah, there's lines, but from what I see is that they'll probably, at the end of the day, be able to get something. They might have to wait for a while, but it's not like they're going to go home empty-handed. Like in Colombia, they might go home empty-handed, or there's hoarders, and the hoarders, a lot of times, are practically ran like cartels, and you might have to do something very shady in order to actually, for them to give you the food, or you might have to give up your daughter for almost a night with one of these people in order to get food. These people that run a lot of these smuggling operations across from Venezuela to Colombia are very shady people. And also, what's crossing the border is paramilitary and stuff like that plan on doing sabotage attacks against Venezuela. So that's why they had to shut down the border for a while, because it got out of hand. The border was shut down when I went, and I was right by the border. And there was a tension inside the city because they were low on gas. The illegal market had dried up basically, and so there was a shortage of the legal market because they hadn't been trying to accommodate to all these people and it led to huge lines, and it led to shortages. They were out for days of gasoline. There was barely any way to get gasoline. There was the people that were selling didn't really even have that much, so they would be trying to make more money on less, so they would be making like a alternative to it. So they would actually they would use regular gasoline, and then put like they put I don't know, I guess they put something in the, they had like some kind of consistency. I don't know what it did, but it was bad for it. It could damage the engines. I know that. I mean, I don't think it was like literally mixing it with water or something like that, but it probably was something like watery substance. I don't know that, or something was, or something like weed almost, like a kind of filler. Probably something that has like a whatever, something similar to oil. It's not oil, something cheap, and then I guess that sometimes works with the engine. But they were just worried about making a quick buck, so they don't care if it actually they came back probably for the. It's not like they had to worry about the quality of the product they were selling to their consumers. These are just shady men at the street that are just trying to take advantage of the shortages and the situation that was happening at the time, and it's still happening on the border, and it's gotten worse. One in 2016, and Venezuela's rough times will probably end in not too long, but Colombia's, I don't know if it'll end because it's never really ended. They've had struggles like this for a long, long time. And they've had violence from their paramilitaries, assassinations. Recently, community leaders inside of Colombia have been assassinated. There's been left and right violence by now to the right wing of Colombia is involved with a ton of violence. It's no longer it never really was exclusively the FARC. It was also the paramilitary a lot of the time. And FARC hasn't been really much of a adversary for many, many years. The Colombian people haven't became victims of FARC recently. It's more really, I think, the 80s and the 70s where FARC was actually an effective force. And FARC's been around since the 60s. That was 64 was when the war started. And now the war it's the longest continuous war, the active war that's right now on the planet. Colombia and the FARC and there's been ceasefires and stuff, but there's never been a formalized treaty between the two. So actually, I guess in the way it's not, because the Korean War, there's no formalized treaty between North and South in the United States. There's just the armistice, which, remember, at one point was actually about to be revoked in 2013 when there was the aggression between the United States and North Korea, which, remember, it was a B-52 flyover by the United States that really kicked it off, that really got that they were acting like they were going to cross the border, but it was an exercise, causing that kind of tension on the airspace by the border is not going to help de-escalate the situation, but that's what they were doing, was escalating the situation. And I think the what happened, what in Colombia, what the deal is that they've had times where they were at peace for many years, and then not many years, but a few years, and then a few events would happen. There'd be some battles, and then it would stop again for a few years, and there'd be some more battles, and now it's been just like limited fighting here and there. Recently, there hasn't been. Now it's been they've been practically pushed down to the mountains. There's no real anything happening in the cities or anything like that for FARC. As well, there's the in the Civil War, there's the paramilitaries that worked with the Colombian government, which did all kinds of shady shit and shady stuff. That would be the assassinations, the killing of community leaders, and paramilitaries. I mean, they work hand in hand with the Colombian government, for example, to go plan sabotage against Venezuela, and that's why the paramilitary was going over across the border to go to Venezuela. The situation inside of Colombia, though, and this is not of a socialist country, this is of a United States ally, what most people consider a lot of people consider a free market a lot for Colombia for the South American standards. Is that really there might not be a better place inside of definitely the best place I think in the region in that part of South America to do business but that's what rated by these like people like the Forbes or the Cato Institute as to be very good for business, and they have all these problems. I mean, the situation is going from, as they would say in Colombia, from Guatemala to Guadalupe, going from because Guatemala being bad, and then Guadalupe is worse. So that's what the situation in Colombia is becoming. It's becoming worse instead of better, as they're having a slow inflation problem. Slowly, the inflation is getting worse and worse and worse. And there's a possibility that at one point they could just really break out and become hyperinflation, like what happened in Germany, where at one point in 1920, the Reichsmark was worth 4.2 or it was 4.2 Reichsmarks to a dollar. Then in 1923, it was worth 4.2 trillion Reichsmarks to a dollar. People were using it for firewood. People were using it for decorations, but they weren't really using it for money. But it wasn't worth anything. That's what could happen in Colombia if they're not careful. And it happened in Zimbabwe for different reasons. Zimbabwe happened because of economic warfare that they pressured on the people, pressured on the country, from making it rather very hard for them to trade with anybody. The Zimbabwean dollar lost more and more and more value, and with pressure on by the international bankers, they pretty much destroyed the Zimbabwean dollar because Robert Mugabe wouldn't play ball with Britain anymore. And he wouldn't play ball with the West. Mugabe won't even play ball in his own country. For example, he won't allow foreign business owners to buy up all the land of Zimbabwe, and he gave back land that had been stolen prior to the revolution to the Zimbabwean people. And some people say that he's a reverse of the South African apartheid government. They say that he is racist against whites, and that whites are underrepresented in his country. Well, in Zimbabwe, 1% of the government, they got one seat, belongs to a white guy in the opposition party, and 1% of the country is white. So that's representative, isn't it? But, of course, there's going to be all these think tanks and stuff that are going to be saying that the situation's unfair for the whites inside this country, which is kind of funny to see. It's kind of funny to see this. Well, some people will be talking about Mugabe. We'll talk about how the United States foreign policy is unfair in many other places, but with Mugabe, they have a different perspective. They see because they'll say that he's a tyrant and that he's killing white people inside of Zimbabwe, but all he's doing is just his national sovereignty of his country that he's protecting, and he's just not allowing the British minority that's still there, or whatever, the white minority that's still there, in order to retake power, because they'll definitely eye it. That's what that opposition party there is about, is that they eventually want to restore some kind of white minority government like they have in Rhodesia. But Rhodesia was a colony of Britain during before 1980. It was a colony of it was a colony of Britain, and Zimbabwe had the revolution where Mugabe was a big part of, and they had the Mugabe coming up to power, and then even first he played ball with Britain. That was the thing, and he was actually respected by Britain. But then he became separate and wanted sovereignty for his country and for his people, and that's when they really started to not like him. And he united two different political groups, and Zimbabwe did very well in the 90s, and then the 2000s they really put some hard economic sanctions against him, and then his country started to sputter out and have some serious problems economically, and then they became like there's 300 billion Zimbabwean dollars to buy some eggs, which sounds absolutely ridiculous. But then you realize it's happened before. And it happened to Germany back in the 1920s after the Treaty of Versailles absolutely tore into the post-World War I German economy, which is what happened in Zimbabwe, is that this was a punishment from big bankers and stuff for Zimbabwe wanted to put sovereignty. And Libya, the thing was that if they were eventually able to split away completely, and they didn't have a Rothschild bank, and they were making a gold dinar to not only they were looking at it. I think they already had the dinar for their own people, but they were going to make the gold dinar for all of Africa, the entire continent. I'm assuming it was already backed by gold. Maybe it wasn't backed by gold for their own national currency. I'm pretty sure, though, I know what they were doing is they were going to look for the entire continent to back the entire continent's currency by gold and to officially end all kinds of new colonialism on the entire continent of Africa. And Gaddafi and Mugabe only seem the recent leaders that I can really think of that really were for the African people, and they were both socialists. And a lot of times the people in the alternative media will talk about them favorably, but we'll talk about socialism badly. I think that maybe we need to realize that we need to readjust our priorities and look at what is their relations with the big bankers and what's the relation with the big Z's in the room. The big Z's definitely doesn't mean Zimbabweans. The Zimbabweans don't have a political lobby inside the United States that influences all politicians inside the United States, practically, minus one or two. Maybe Justin Amash is the only one congressman that is not totally in bed with Israel of today. And his own father was Palestinian. He would have to be. I mean, that would be an absolute disgrace if he was not pro-Palestinian to some extent. And he's not even pro-Palestinian. It's for two-state solution. If you're, that's the two-state solution is really what Israel's they say sometimes that they want the two-state solution. Well, you know what Israel's definition of the two-state solution? The Palestinian state being a prison. Like, have you seen those comics where it shows it's like, oh, look, we have the two-state solution. Oh, yeah, I like it. And then it shows like these Netanyahu looking at a prison with the Palestinian flag on top of it, and then Israel, normal in the background. When was it? Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to Voice of Rebellion tonight. We got just about 2 minutes left or so left of the show. Definitely great. Bring a little bit of just the thoughts from the different parts of around the horn, thinking about different perspectives of what people are thinking when it comes to that topic. I know it's straight away and went off on my tangent as usual because that's what I do, and that's how Voice of Rebellion works. Next weekend's July 17th. Hopefully we'll have some good show really made up by then. This show, I think, was pretty good. Hope you guys thought that the same way. I'm going to be hopefully trying to get some more podcasts in here this week. I haven't done one in a while on Chris Jackson Rojas' Facebook profile. If you haven't subscribed to that, go subscribe to it now. That's where I put a lot of news, and I put a lot of stuff that's going on right now, a lot of memes, a lot of political images, and I mean, I put a lot of time into it. And when I'm not at work, I'm on that a lot. That's the thing, is that this week, I don't know, this week...
Point of no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return. And if I back down,